You know, that's unusual. Because you know that most pretty girls, they don't have a brain in their head. I mean, most pretty girls, they don't care about anything that's happening around them, except that they want to have a good time. Isn't it so?
Yes, I guess most girls are pretty dumb.
When looking up filmmaker Elaine May on Google, the Wikipedia tab on the side of the page lists her as an American comedian. Though this is true, May did have a highly successful career as a comedian and actor alongside Mike Nichols. Many remember May not for her acting in comedy, but for her stint as a director in the 70s through the 80s, directing only 4 films in her entire career, one being an infamous commercial flop. It makes sense that May would be appreciated more for her role as an actress and screenwriter. But these 4 films are arguably extremely important to the new wave of Hollywood that had started in the 60s and was in full swing by the 70s when May was making film. Her contemporaries were all men, all directors informed by the auteur theory that had risen out of the French New Wave in the 60s. May was no exception. She was famously hard to work with,
saying,
going
"Are
way
you going to
over
be in
budget
it?"
in
Yes.
many of her productions,
Did she
and
write it?
reportedly
Yes.
shooting
Is she
1.4
going to direct it?
million
Yes.
feet of tape
What
for
else do
Mikey
I
and
have to
Nicky,
know?
over double that of Gone with the Wind, a 4-hour film. May's contemporaries were creating films like Taxi Driver, The Godfather, and Chinatown, all films that on some level reveled in violence and chauvinism. Though these films strove to tell deep, complex stories about troubled men, women were consistently seen as objects through the male gaze. The big Hollywood pictures of the past, which valued the female audience member, were seen as superficial, so auteurs at the time began to solely value the male point of view. This is interesting, seeing as at the same time that these films were premiering, so was feminist film criticism, with Laura Mulvey's Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema coming out in 1973. May's first 2 films, A New Leaf and A Heartbreak Kid, were comedies.
Do you sense at all what I'm trying to say?
More similar to the themes of fellow auteur Woody Allen than those of Scorsese and Coppola. Then came Mikey and Nicky. On the surface, Mikey and Nicky is a dramatic mob buddy film similar to Mean Streets and The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, but its drama is told through the lens of comedy, following the yes-and method of improv acting that May was so fond of. The film follows Nicky, a low-level mobster who believes there's a hit out on him for stealing money.
Getting off.
What do you mean you're getting off? Where are you going?
And Mikey, his childhood friend and fellow mobster, who seemingly comes to Nicky's aid to help him skip town. Nicky has a hard time trusting Mikey
I'm in
with
trouble.
good intuition, seeing as Mikey is assisting the hitman.
Came as soon as I got your towel.
You were sitting in that
Trying to
bar for
keep Nicky
45
in one
minutes.
location long enough for the hit
You
to
never
go
once
through.
thought about calling your wife.
Though many believe that
Never once
Mikey and
thought
Nicky is a
about calling
film
her
that had a
Annie.
great amount of improvisation on the part of its lead actors,
All of a
Peter
sudden you
Falk
gotta
and
call
John
Annie.
Cassavetes, the reality is that the script was meticulously planned, with May having written it originally in 1952 as a one-act play and developing it over the years. To quote May,
"You can do something dramatically or you can do it funny. You can kill somebody dramatically or you can kill them funny. Funny is closer to life. If you kill somebody in a drama, you get a gun and shoot them and they die, and then you're left to face the consequences of your act. If you kill somebody in a comedy, you have to start out by finding a place where you can buy a gun that can't be traced. Or you have to buy a gun and then spend your evenings and weekends filing off the serial number. Comedy is almost entirely the doing of something in detail, step by tiny step. Drama sort of sweeps everything away."
this quote perfectly sums up the deceit in Mikey and Nicky. In a film like The Godfather, Michael Corleone's first assassination is stressful, but he's able to pull it off eventually. By the end of the film, he orders hits on tens of mob officials, which are pulled off by his underlings in a tight montage. On the other hand, Mikey and Nicky's comedy comes from the struggle to assassinate Nicky, with his manic energy moving him and Mikey from location to location, missing Ned Beatty's hapless hitman by minutes at every turn as he is held up by traffic and the inability to find a parking space. This dark comedy is seemingly poking fun at the films of May's contemporaries, showing how clumsy and uncool being in the mob really is. This comedic element, however, quickly becomes painfully unfunny once the hitman finally closes in on Nicky in the suburbs as the sun rises, a truly mundane place to die. Nicky bangs on Mikey's door, begging to be let in, mirroring the start of the film when their roles are reversed. Mikey and his wife push a drab couch against the door as the hitman's car nears and Nicky is shot on their doorstep. The audience mourns Nicky's death, but not because of his passing, but because of what it means to Mikey, losing the only connection to his childhood. Nicky is a manic sociopathic chauvinist, and his machismo is not glamorized by the film. It is pathetic and leads to his downfall. In an earlier scene, Mikey is seemingly ready to abandon this mission and help Nicky skip town.
Where there's an airport and take a plane out.
We.
You're going with me.
Yeah. Yeah, you son of a bitch. I'm coming with you.
Won't that get you in bed with Resnick? Disappearing like that. Don't you think you ought to make some excuse to him for leaving? These guys don't like to look bad.
Fuck 'em.
But Nicky's need to humiliate Mikey and prove himself as more masculine ruins his chances of surviving the night. Which brings us to the sex scene, the most outwardly sexist and chauvinistic scene in the film. When I first watched it, I thought to myself, how could a female director write this? A woman facing so much violence at the hands of otherwise sympathetic protagonists, essentially being raped by one of them. What's feminist about this? Upon repeated viewings and research, I began to change my mind. While the film is no feminist masterpiece, it doesn't subvert the male gaze and reclaim the mob movie genre for women, this scene feels like May winking to the audience. Nicky's girlfriend, Nellie, whom he uses as a tool to humiliate Mikey, delivers all her lines over-dramatically.
She bit your lip? Oh, get out of here! Give this man a handkerchief. His lip is bleeding. Get out of here!
Contrasting with Falk and Cassavetes' realistic delivery, she makes political commentary almost randomly,
I'm interested to see what happens in Indochina.
displaying her intelligence and strive to keep up with current events, but is almost comically seduced by Cassavetes after a single kiss. She is almost a caricature of femininity, overdone to the point of satire, as if May is making fun of how her contemporaries write women and how they are seduced by their leading men. The casting of Cassavetes as Nicky is genius, since the tone of the film mirrors many of his own, as does this specific scene with its lackluster treatment of women. This scene also makes us confront the ugly reality of what mobsters really were, beyond their glamorized depictions in 70s film. In his essay on Elaine May's filmography, Kyle Stevens writes,
Can Mike really be in on the killing of his dear friend? Can Nick really be a rapist? We are made to feel paranoid for wondering, and then think
Mikey and
surely
Nicky
not as
makes
we
the
come to know the
audience face the
characters,
uncomfortable
only to
truth that
find
these
out
men
the
are
answer is an
ultimately
unequivocal
pathetic,
yes.
bumbling fools
We always knew the
capable of
darker sides
extreme
of the character
violence.
types Hollywood encouraged us to
It's
love.
all right.
We just did not like
Element's
to
okay.
admit it.
Oh, dear.
Jesus,
That's
you know you
supposed
got
to
big
shock
hands.
me.
What?
You got big hands.
Mikey and Nicky also thrives in the discomfort that buddy movies inspire, towing the line between heterosexual friendship and homoerotic ex-lovers. The first 15 minutes of the film contained in the hotel room feels like two lovers reuniting, Mikey cradling Nicky's head and fussing over his health. Only once they leave the isolation of the hotel room do they mention their wives and families, performing heterosexuality failed on the side of Nicky. His wife has left him.
Jan left me.
Did?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
Took the kid and moved to a mother's.
This facade soon crumbles as their past comes up, culminating in them fighting in the streets, which is stated by critic Richard Brody in a featurette for the Criterion Collection.
It almost plays like a love scene. They move through the streets like dancers. It's a very intensely physical film.
Mikey is undoubtedly feminized in the film, in the role of the duplicitous caretaker, being treated almost as terribly as Nicky's girlfriend Nellie. Falk's bumbling and self-conscious portrayal of Mikey, paired with Cassavetes' Casanova status, only fortifies this element. He confronts Nicky after his posturing with Nellie, claiming that,
Because I don't think you love anyone but you.
Mikey and Nicky's homoerotic relationship is another one of May's reversals, as if she is daring her audience to read into it, to pervert the facade of heterosexual male friendship. And queer audiences have, seeing as most contemporary analysis of the film focuses on the romantic relationship between the protagonists over almost anything else. As Alexander Doty explains in his novel Making Things Perfectly Queer, even the most heterosexual of texts can have queer moments, queer storylines. And what is more heterosexual than chauvinist gangsters having dubious sex with prostitutes? May seems to have read into the queer subtext behind films like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Edge of the City and applied them to her own film, subverting expectations once again. In the end, both Mikey and Nicky, infantile down to their childhood nicknames that title the film, lose. Nicky dies in a gated suburb, away from his beloved nightlife, away from his lovers, separated only by a door from his protector-turned-assassin. Mikey, in his necessary violent cutoff of a toxic friend, or even lover, has essentially killed the only link to his past, the only person that can prove that his childhood ever happened, that his childhood was ever there. While many gangster films of the era have similar grim endings, none are quite so pathetic. May, once again, is using her experience with comedy and subversion to create a truly depressing turn of events. By the end of the film, Mikey and Nicky are left humiliated and alone, with no winners as the sun comes up on Philadelphia.